Hello, my name is Leo Hohmann. Many of you know me as a researcher and writer about the issues that are facing our Western civilization in these dark times. And much of what we see happening in the world is being instigated by those behind the scenes and the actors who actually are playing out uh, the evil that we see in our society. Many of them don't even know what they're doing. And this is happening on the right, and sometimes even it is happening on the left, I should say, as well as sometimes on the right. And we saw an example of this today in New Zealand, in which an attack on a mosque created 49 casualties. 49, possibly 50 Muslim worshippers were gunned down in this horrific attack. And I would like to be placed on the record as saying this is exactly the type of thing that we do not want to see in our America or in our world. I write predominantly, I write and speak for a Christian audience. It often goes without saying that we abhor violence or anything approaching violence. I have been on the record in the past saying that in condemning not only violence against Muslims, but any type of harassment of Muslims. I have seen on blogs on Facebook where people, say that, oh, we should just go and spread pig blood on their mosque or bacon grease on their mosque and they'll go away. And I always take those opportunities to say, no, that is exactly the wrong approach. We are to reach out to Muslims in love with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And anything short of that is actually playing right into the hands of the Sharia supremacists. Everything that we say in our critique of Islam must be couched in terms of peaceful resistance. We will peacefully resist the advancement of Sharia, global Sharia, to our death if necessary. But I myself will say that I will never fight back tit for tat, an eye for an eye in a violent way. We see Muslims killing Christians all over the world today. 11 Christians every day lose their lives simply for their faith. And 90% of those lost lives are at the hands of Sharia compliant Muslims. The rest are at the hand of communists. And so this is all documented by Open Doors, which is a wonderful organization. Everybody should go to their website. It is nonpartisan, non-political. It simply documents the number of tragic lives lost at the hand of predominantly communism and Islamism. And so now we have an attack against a mosque. This is very rare, but we will see the global media go literally insane with this. They will run with this for days. They will try to pin it on Christianity when the truth of the matter is that this perpetrator is nothing of the sort. He is not a Christian. Anybody who could do something like this is not a Christian. Jesus said, if you live by the sword, you will surely die by the sword. And so Christians are dying by the sword even though they are peaceful in many of the Islamic cultures and countries around the world. So we certainly do not need to engage with them at this level or anything close to approaching this level ever. And so that is my statement, and I just wish everybody peace and truth. These are the two big things that I promote. Peaceful outreach, loving our Muslim neighbors, because they, after all, this is another important point, Muslims are the first victims of Sharia, especially Muslim women. They endure all sorts of atrocities: female genital mutilation, honor violence, child spouses being taken by 50, 60, 70-year-old men. And so we must be compassionate towards Muslim people, and we must reach out to them in love. Thank you, and God bless you. Hello, my name is Leo Hohmann, and I'm here to deliver a speech that I was able to give to my local county GOP convention recently. The speech was exceptionally well received by the 100 or so folks that were gathered on a Saturday morning, gave up their Saturday morning to come out and take care of county GOP business. What they did not expect was to hear about the red-green axis, which was the topic of my speech. I asked them beforehand, 100 or so people, how many of them had heard of the red-green axis, and not one of them raised their hand. So they were all ears as I delivered the following speech, which I'm going to try to replicate here for you online. The title, Knowing Your Enemy, the red-green axis comes to Georgia. Of course, we know it's coming to a community near you, no matter where you live. And so we feel like this is a pertinent thing for conservative Americans to hear, no matter what community and what state in which you live. How many of you have been watching the news in recent weeks and wondering, is this still America? What in the heck is going on? How many Americans must be wondering, where did this Ilhan Omar, covered in Islamic headscarf, come from, and how in the world did she end up in Congress? We're told she's from Minnesota, but she seems to be obsessed with demonizing Israel and speaks sympathetically of ISIS fighters. Who is this other new congressman with the foul mouth, Representative Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, who bragged to the world that she would take drastic action against President Trump? She told her young son she would impeach the mother effer. Who does this Linda Sarsour, also adorned in the headscarf, think she is, referring to Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi as some sort of white supremacist? Pelosi is a, quote, typical white feminist doing the work of powerful white men, Sarsour said. She posted that actually on Facebook. Did Pelosi deserve such a harsh rebuke for simply considering disciplinary action against the brazen anti-Semite Ilhan Omar? 2 years ago, I wrote a book. It's called Stealth Invasion, Muslim Conquest Through Immigration and Resettlement Jihad. I saw these people coming. Let me tell you how I knew that the fox was already inside the henhouse. The Muslim Brotherhood published a revealing document back in 1991. It was seized by the FBI in 2004, and in 2008 it was presented as evidence in the biggest terror financing trial ever conducted on U.S. soil. That document is called the Explanatory Memorandum. It says, and I quote, these are the words of the Muslim Brotherhood, not mine. The process of settlement is a civilization jihad process with all the word means. The Brotherhood must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of the believers, so that it is eliminated and Allah's religion is made victorious over all other religions, unquote. The Muslim Brotherhood is the most powerful, most wealthy Muslim organization in the world. It operates in the United States through the Council on American Islamic Relations, also known as CARE, and a host of other front groups, too numerous to mention. The leader of the Democratic Party, Nancy Pelosi, bowed down to CARE this week when she failed to rebuke Omar and stand against anti-Semitic, anti-Israel bigotry. Pelosi removed all doubt as to who is really in charge on Capitol Hill. It's not the old-line Democrats, the liberals. It is the new breed of Democrat, the so-called progressives, who now call the shots. We are seeing nothing less than the convergence of the red-green axis right before our eyes. Red, which is Marxist ideology, and green, which is Islamic ideology, are coming together for a complete and total transformation of America. They decide what is acceptable political speech in Washington, and the corporate media backs them up with nonstop propaganda. They will increasingly be coming after us, the people of conservative Judeo-Christian values, in the months and years ahead. Trust me, these folks do not play nice. They are coming for our jobs. They're coming for our businesses. They're coming for our guns, our cars. They are even coming for our children with state-run daycare for infants and toddlers. Those they cannot terminate, they will indoctrinate. In submitting to radicals like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Speaker Pelosi has confirmed what we all suspected. The new Democrat Party is the party of revolutionary socialism, open borders, anti-Semitic Jew hatred, voting rights for non-citizens, abortion on demand, and now, yes, even infanticide, killing babies outside the womb. So when a young freshman congresswoman named Ilhan Omar came out with repeated anti-Semitic statements calling Israel evil, quote, and stating that those of us who support Israel's right to exist are somehow under the influence of, quote, dual loyalties and cannot be trusted, she was speaking directly from the culture she was brought up in. Omar, you see, is a Sharia-compliant Muslim from Somalia who was brought to the U.S. by the United Nations Refugee Program run through our own U.S. State Department for the last 35 years. How many of you know that the United Nations selects 95% of our refugees? That's right. Is it any wonder that an increasing number of these refugees in recent years have come from societies and cultures antithetical to our own, which was molded by Judeo-Christian ethics based on hard work, the golden rule, and the rule of law? These are the values that underpin our Constitution. Yet, the UN has the agenda for us that seeks to undermine our Constitution. How will they do it? They will do it by opening the borders, introducing anti-Western and anti-Christian ideologies like Islam, and socialist economic programs like the Green New Deal, which is nothing more than the UN's failed 20-year-old program for sustainable development. Part of that agenda to remove our borders and boundaries between the nations is the refugee resettlements. The globalists understand that demography is destiny, and the best way to establish global socialism is to insert dependent third worlders into our Western society. These folks have no intention of assimilating. This creates a parallel society, a nation within a nation. I have documented all of this in their own words in my book, and you can follow updates on this very crucial subject online at my website, leohohmann.com. Ilhan Omar conceded this when she said in a recent tweet that Judeo-Christian culture was, quote, silly, and being a good American just meant being yourself. Is it any wonder she sent a letter to a federal judge in Minnesota pleading for leniency for returning ISIS fighters? They're just being themselves, right? And if you think otherwise, well, you're just Islamophobic and need to shut up. Some of these refugees, I do believe, truly want to assimilate, but their leaders, people like Omar and Linda Sarsour, won't let them. They are repeatedly told to remain insulated and apart from the rest of us, that Western and American values are inherently bad and corrupting. This is exactly what the Muslim Brotherhood envisioned when it talked about establishing settlements inside America that would eventually become politically active voting blocs and work with far-left Democrats to transform our nation into a totalitarian system. This is what it's all about. This is the end game, totalitarianism. The people who say there is no God have joined forces with the people who say there is no God but Allah. And that, folks, is a powerful combination. These are not, as we've heard, your grandmother's Democrats. They are way more aggressive in pushing their agenda, and they are coming after us. You are no longer just required to tolerate same-sex marriage and transgender bathrooms. You must celebrate the new normal as defined by them. If you don't, you are immoral and less than human. You may even be a white supremacist. Ilhan Omar reflects exactly the worldview of Somalia, only with a Western twist. She will give license for all the things she knows will destroy us from within: abortion, gun control, legalization of drugs, and lots of free stuff for all the newly created victims. And she did not end up in the U.S. Congress by accident or through some organic political movement. Her state, Minnesota, has been welcoming refugees since 1990. Since that time, the UN has delivered more than 75,000 Somalis to Minnesota, first to Minneapolis, but now spreading into smaller cities and towns where they are employed in the meatpacking industry primarily, but also as airport cab drivers, hotel maids, and in other low-wage industries. The receiving communities are in various stages of transformation. Some have reached the point where an American would not recognize it as part of America. The Cedar Riverside area of Minneapolis is called, quote, Little Mogadishu. It has Sharia cops who make house calls to make sure the refugees are following the rules of Islamic dress codes and the strict regulation of interaction between the sexes. The former mayor of Minneapolis, Betsy Hodges, met with Somali elders covered in hijab, which is not a fashionable headscarf as some in the media would have you believe, but a sign of religious submission to Allah and Islamic law. Demography is destiny. Universities and even some primary schools in Minnesota are now outfitted with Islamic prayer rooms and ritual foot baths. Islamic holidays are replacing Christian ones on school calendars. The same culture shift is taking place in parts of Michigan, New Jersey, and even in once conservative states like Kansas, Iowa, and Idaho, where the world's largest yogurt plant is staffed with 30% refugee labor. They make demands, we submit. Omar, like her compatriots, recognizes Sharia as the law of the land, not the U.S. Constitution. They have a particular hatred for Israel, the world's only Jewish state, and want to see it hit with economic sanctions, boycotts, and divestment. They have very large families, and they vote 99% Democrat. Omar supports abortion on demand, knowing that her people will never abort their babies because that would be a violation of Sharia. But she is more than happy for us to abort ours. On the battlefield, there's a saying: to have any chance of victory, you must what? Know your enemy. It's the same in the political arena. Failure to know our political enemies and what they truly stand for will be catastrophic for our republic. It was not a mistake, as Nancy Pelosi would have us believe, that Ilhan Omar called Israel evil. It was not a mistake that she said Jews are, quote, all about the Benjamins, baby. It was not a mistake that she pulled out the old blood libel that Jews and those who support Israel are guilty of having, quote, dual loyalties. This is the same ploy the Nazis used to stir up hatred against Jews in Europe. And this is what the Sharia adherent Islam followers believed still to this day. So instead of following her first instincts and passing a resolution condemning anti-Semitism and disciplining Omar, what did Pelosi do? She kowtowed to Omar and her Muslim backers at CARE, the Council on American-Islamic Relations, letting them write the resolution themselves. Of course, the final version was not a condemnation of anti-Semitism, but a generic condemnation of hate speech against all religions. Well, almost all. Hinduism, Judaism, Sikhism, they're all mentioned in this resolution as victims of hate speech. Christianity is nowhere to be found. This, even though Christians are the most persecuted religious group in the world today. Every day, 11 Christians die for their faith somewhere in the world. 255 die each month, often by the most cruel means. And almost all of them die at the hands of Islamists and communists. the same two groups we now see teaming up in the West. They single out this one faith group, Christianity, because the left knows that it is the one faith that provides the values that are written into our Constitution. Respect for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom to own firearms. Do you think any of these values are respected in Somalia, in Sudan, in Afghanistan, Burma, Iran, or Iraq? Well, it's no accident that these are the nations from which President Obama and the presidents who preceded him were plucking the bulk of our refugees. Demography truly is destiny. In Georgia, we sat aghast as returns were coming in during the last gubernatorial election. When the dust had finally settled, we breathed a collective sigh of relief. Surely that was the end of Stacey Abrams. But I'm here to tell you that our relief was premature, and that was just the opening salvo of the new progressive movement in Georgia. Abrams is a member of this progressive movement, and her handlers, folks like Linda Sarsour, have big plans for her and for Georgia. Remember, when you hear progressive, that is code for Marxist. Abrams has made no secret of her agenda and the fact that she embraces the red-green axis as the path forward for our state and for our country. She happily received ringing endorsements from Sarsour, who came to Georgia to campaign for her. Rashida Tlaib, a Palestinian American, was produced by demographic changes in Michigan that saw vast numbers of Middle Easterners who came to work in the auto industry, primarily Ford Motor Company, but the others as well, back in the 1940s and 50s. They were never encouraged to assimilate into that great melting pot called America. In Georgia, it's the poultry plants in Hall County and a few other low-skill industries that are driving demographic changes fueled by the corporate thirst for cheap labor. Make no mistake, it is, it can, and it will happen here if we do not understand our battle. I tell a true story in my book that happened right here in the Atlanta area. It was the day after Memorial Day, 2016. A young mother and her teenage daughter were sitting in their garage, the door open, admiring the beautiful weather that they had on that spring morning, and looking out over their front yard where they had a U.S. flag, an American flag, flying from their mailbox. It was attached to a homemade flagpole made out of PVC pipe. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a tall woman dressed in a burqa, only her eyes could be seen, came out of the woods near their house. The woman grabbed the PVC flagpole off of the mailbox and attacked the mother, swinging wildly for her face. The daughter helped the mother wrestle the woman to the ground. A vicious struggle ensued. The son, who was only 14 years old, came out of the house with the family pistol, and thank God did not pull the trigger, because a neighbor came from the house next door to help the two women subdue this attacker. It turns out this woman was a Somali refugee. She was arrested and charged, but never showed up for her court hearing, and to this day remains unaccounted for. There's stories like this and much worse I document in my book, Stealth Invasion, in communities throughout the country. I've documented multiple stabbings, rapes, and murders by refugees in Minnesota, the Dakotas, Idaho, and on the campus of Ohio State University. The FBI confirms that at least 45 Somalis living in Minnesota have left our country to go fight for ISIS. Dozens of others have been charged with providing material support to overseas terrorists. Those are the guys Ilhan Omar wants to go easy on. She's pleaded for judges to give light sentences and consider putting them in rehab as opposed to long prison sentences. It should be no surprise that the FBI has identified Omar's congressional district, the 5th Congressional District of Minnesota, as the terror recruitment capital of America. By incremental changes in our 50 states, our nation is being transformed and is being coordinated with great success by the globalist Marxists in alliance with the Muslim Brotherhood. Together, this red-green axis has their sights on President Donald Trump. Just days after he took office, Linda Sarsour, in an address to the Islamic Society of North America, called for U.S. Muslims to wage political jihad against Trump's presidency. As the saying goes, nothing in politics happens by accident. And everything we see going on in Washington today is being conducted with one goal in mind: to defeat President Trump and his anti-UN America First agenda. My book documents the agenda of this red-green axis to replace our constitutional republic with something more amenable to global socialism, a system where your children and your grandchildren won't get to make the same choices that you were free to make. Where will they work? What form of transportation will they use to get to work? What doctor will they choose? What opinions will they be allowed to express on their college campuses or on social media? All these choices will be made for them under the new social order being defined by the political elites who make up the red-green axis. The only difference between traditional Marxism and the neo-Marxism of Abrams, Omar, and Sarsour is that instead of stoking divisions between workers and their employers, they use race, gender, sexual orientation, and non-assimilating migrants to stir up animosity and create fissures in our society where they previously did not exist. Legitimate racial wounds that have existed in our history must not be allowed to be healed. They must be stoked and fueled with the gasoline of identity politics. Whenever a Democrat loses an election, whether it be Hillary or Stacey, that election must be declared illegitimate. The ultimate goal of all Marxists is, after all, a permanent one-party state. President Trump wants your children and grandchildren to make their own choices, to live in freedom and to prosper according to their God-given talents and abilities, not according to what some government bureaucrat says is best for them. Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, even Bernie Sanders, none of them matter anymore. The ones to watch are the new revolutionary socialists, the ones who call themselves what? Progressive. All the others are just playing catch-up, groveling for support from the socialists who now set the agenda for them. That agenda is above all globalist, socialist, and extending government favoritism to one religion, Islam, above all others. This agenda is exposed completely in my book. Among all the reviews the book has received, one theme has been dominant. It connects dots. It helps us understand the values of those taking over the Democrat Party and who want to take over our country. Some Democrats are beginning to see through this agenda and are walking away from their party. Maybe it's time they get reintroduced to the Republican Party, where we will explain to them that we are the ones who respect life. We are the ones who respect your freedom to think as an individual and still possess the courage to stand against the dictates of totalitarian groupthink. Thank you, and God bless you, and God bless America.